Hey, gang, this is Carl White, and I am broadcasting out of the Scotsman Guide studios over here. And you are listening to where we do a deep dive of the authors of the articles for the Scotsman's Guide. We call this the Author Showcase. And I am going to be your co-pilot today. The pilot in command is Jim Paolino, who is the CEO of LodeStar Software Solutions. And Jim, we'll ask you to tell us more about that here in just a little bit. And you wrote a great article in the September edition of the residential edition of the Scotsman's Guide. And the title of the article was called Taking Flight. So if you haven't, as you listen to this, if you haven't read the article, make sure you go to the scotsmansguide.com and go check out the September edition. It's a really good read. So Jim, give us like a 30,000 foot view of the article Taking Flight and kind of the main message behind it.
Yeah, and Carl, thanks so much to you and the Scotsman Guide Group for having me here. I think I'm more along for the ride than the actual pilot of this, but happy to be here nonetheless.
Good enough.
Yeah. So I think the main idea of the article and a lot of what we talk about is how can you take advantages of these downturns? Because anyone who's been in the real estate industry for literally more than a minute knows that it's incredibly cyclical. And I think the point I was trying to make is, one, not only do the good companies make their big strides during these downtimes, take flight, if you will, but it's actually these smaller independent companies that are, in my opinion, the backbone of the industry that are really better suited to excel during these points of time, because you can specialize. You don't have the same high level of interest in the company if you're VC backed, if you're anything like that. You're your own bank, you're paying for everything yourself. It has its pros and cons, but ultimately it allows people to be a little more inventive, be a little more resilient, and really fight for what they think is right in these periods. And in many cases, it can set you up to succeed when things do turn, because if there's anything we know about the real estate industry, it always happens, we're one day closer to the next real estate boom.
What do you think it is that separates the small companies that succeed during these times versus those that don't get on the other side of it? Because we've seen companies already starting to fall apart. What do you think? What's the difference?
So I'm just about at the 10-year anniversary of LodeStar, and one thing that I've really learned here is the idea of you need to niche to get rich, right? And I'm sure that holds true in your podcast, right? And when who you market to, what you talk about is probably only gotten more specialized over the years. And I think smaller companies by nature just have to do that, right? The only way that you can compete is to find a niche and own it. Whether that niche be geographic, if you're, the Conshohocken, Pennsylvania mortgage guy, that's the town that we're in here. Or if you're only focusing on a specific product type or something like that. So I think having to hyper focus is super important, and knowing that, you always kind of have to be your own backstop in a way. So in many ways, nothing's really different for these small companies. In the good times, this is the bad times. It just relates to it a little bit more. And I think we're in a market environment now where you see a lot of companies that aren't, following that traditional economic model, right? The go fast and break things model, the venture cap companies. If you're trying to build the next Amazon, trying to build the next Facebook, you need to do that. But, very often we saw that business model really collapse on itself between Silicon Valley Bank, or just given, people don't want to invest more money in a company that's in an industry that's down 50%. And if you're not profitable, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I've always thought the smaller companies have an advantage in one way from let's call it the big box lender.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a jet ski versus an aircraft carrier. They can turn on a dime, whereas an aircraft carrier takes 2 miles to make a left-hand turn.
Yeah. I always say, right, in business, it's not big beat small, it's fast beat slow.
I like that.
Yeah.
What do you think what are the main challenges for the smaller mortgage businesses in this industry during these downtimes? Like what are the challenges that smaller people have that maybe the bigger don't?
I think retaining people, right? Every person matters a lot more when you're a smaller company. It was a top 10 mortgage lender. I was talking to them, and I think from COVID on, they hired something about 2,000, somewhere between 2,000 to 5,000 people, and about 80% of them were gone by that time. This was probably over about a 2-year stretch. Just think of the human capital, the cost, the time that something like that takes. And very few companies can kind of view it that way. So I think the problem with small companies is you want to retain the good people, and also the money that it takes to survive. You can't necessarily invest in growing and doing the things that are going to help you in the long run. At the same time, I think small companies are better suited to survive because you don't have to be 1,000% profit focused as a smaller company. You can do things to retain people in a way that a larger company or a company that has investors, publicly traded company, they wouldn't, right? I know some title companies out there that basically went to a 4-day week, cut their staff's pay 15%, and said, hey, this is how we're going to retain our core team. And for a larger company, that would probably be a difficult pill to swallow.
Yeah, I in the article you talked about how, or what I thought I read, and you correct me if I misinterpreted this, that we're going to see some technology or innovation, or maybe just a different way of doing things, that the next great company is going to be one of these small companies that starts doing something unique, something different. One of the examples that you gave was that a big problem the mortgage industry has had forever is what you called the 50-day average closing time, which is some a little shorter, some a little longer, but that's probably about right, about 50 days. So just using that one example, what's some ideas that some smaller companies can put into place, or maybe even the bigger ones too, to improve that? How do we get that 50-day down to something remarkably shorter?
I wish there was a silver bullet, right? But I think you just need to use a lot of lead ones. And ultimately, necessity is the mother of invention. And I think that was really what I was touching on in those cases, where small companies will innovate because they have to, right? They have to find ways of saving time. And I think there's a lot of time in the process that's taken by things like title search, waiting on appraisals, waiting on inspections, and viewing, we were at a point in time where people weren't innovating as much when the market was good because they didn't have to, right? And then we get to a point in time like we're in now where people don't innovate as much because they don't have the money to do it. So where's the happy medium? Where are you actually going to spend these things? And I think the companies that are successful always do it, or always look for ways to improve the process. I know I can speak from an example for one of the things that we're looking to do is the time it takes us to onboard a client, we want to cut in half. Right. So similar to cutting down a closing time. And I'm not trying to do it with one fall swoop. What we're trying to do is we broke down the process into every step. It's not that exciting. Every step we have, how long it takes, and where can we cut that out? And I think companies they're kind of being forced to do that now because all of the steps have dollars attached to it. But I think that's the type of thing that you need to do constantly. And I'm an engineer by education, so that's very much kind of in my wheelhouse. I love solving problems. I love breaking down things into processes. But that type of, non-sexy analysis is really what's going to make the biggest difference in doing that. And I would say in the mortgage companies we work with, the folks who have that understanding and the folks who don't, it's a very clear difference.
Yeah, and you also mentioned, which I'm assuming this goes into that shorter closing times, that you thought it's your prediction that the technology, especially you were mentioning about AI, and of course, anytime we think AI, for most of us, myself included, we instantly go to Chat GPT, even though that's just one of many. But how do you see, or do you see the AI and Chat GPT? Do you see that revolutionizing the mortgage industry? And if so, how? Or is it just an overhyped buzzword right now?
Probably a little of both. I think it's going to revolutionize areas of the industry. And I think what you can have AI or a machine do is pretty impressive, but there's things that they will never have kind of a human do. Like I was actually talking to a company yesterday about what they call digital workers. So basically they train a computer using machine learning to replicate some of what you do. So things like order entry, things like probably basic verification of income, basically anything that involves reading information, plugging it in, and verifying it. right? And that's a lot of the mortgage process, but it's not all of the mortgage process. So I think the important thing to realize is, back to kind of the need to break down your process, is there areas that it's going to make sense? And I think the thing that I really want to stress, and the thing that I think is going to be important, is it's not about just replacing people with technology, it's enhancing people with technology, right? So what should a loan officer do at the end of the day? Like, what's the biggest value add that a loan officer can do? Taking an application, verifying income probably isn't the answer, right? But developing rapport, building something in a community, talking to a borrower, making them comfortable and helping them find the best product for them, and establishing themselves as a resource is that. So if you can use technology to minimize a lot of the other parts of what they do that's not that, you've then enhanced that employee. You've gotten someone who does a lot better. Same with, an underwriter. If an underwriter has to, clear conflicts, clear challenging situations, but 80% of their job isn't those, okay, let's expand that 20% that actually is the thing that only they can do. So I think you have to really widen what you're looking at in terms of technology. And sure, if a company has tens of thousands, hundred thousands of people, it doesn't mean that that's not going to result in layoffs, but most companies in this industry don't. So I think it's really important to think, what are people best at? What do we want them to do? And what is the other stuff that we could maybe automate, or even if we automate, 70% of. I think you mentioned ChatGPT, and I'm sure you've played around a little bit like I do. And what I find works really well, if I have a question, if I need an email, if I need something in ChatGPT, it's really good about getting you about 70 to 80% of the way there, but it's never going to be 100%. But that saves you 70% of the work, right? So I think you have to look at it that way, to my point. Like, there's no silver bullets, but using this to really start to shorten things down is important. And I think that's how you can make those big changes. And you don't take flight, just suddenly one day. It's one step at a time. And, the old adage, if you improve 1% a day, by the end of the year, it's, something like 5% improvement, 5 times improvement, or something very, very large number.
So if some of this stuff like this technology and decreasing down to from 50 days closing to something short of that, and using AI technology to maybe help us out with underwriting and shorten those times and scheduling the appraisal and all those things they could do. And obviously these big companies, they can't be dumb people, because dumb people don't get to be a big company, right? I own a company, you own a company. You can't be stupid and run a company. You might I've done stupid things, right? But you can't be stupid. So, and that might be a harsh way to ask this question.
Well, I would also disagree with that, but that's not the point of your question. So,
okay. Yeah. So why do you think the larger companies tend to be slower at adopting this innovative technologies compared to their smaller counterparts? Like, why are they slower?
Harder to implement for a larger company, more risk adverse as a larger company. It's like you said before, you're trying to turn an aircraft carrier opposed to a jet ski. So it's a lot easier to implement technology with 5 users, with 50 users, than with 500 or 5,000. And I think that's where small companies can really leverage these things, because it's going to take time. And then, not to mention just all of the typical kind of hurdles that you need to have as a large company, of vendor management, vendor approval, playing nice. Is this being done in the same department as this? Who's in charge of this? Is that person left? Like, there's just a lot of other conflicts that make larger companies move slower. And I think that kind of adds to it. And in some cases, it could be being risk adverse too. If there's a technology, an application that's somewhat new for the industry, not many very large companies want to be that first mover. Or some large companies say, okay, we'll implement this technology, but we need to own the company who does that. And that's not a way any small company would think.
Yeah. And, I think, and I think the article, if I remember right, it said something in there that larger companies tend to hunker down during these down cycles.
Yep.
How does that, them hunkering down, how does that give the smaller companies, us normal people, how does that give us the upper edge?
Well, we've been hiring in this industry for the last year or so. It's a great time to be hiring. So that's unfortunately one of the ways. There's a lot more people that you can get. And also, they may just not be focused on innovation, or if they are, it's just for the sake of cutting costs as much as possible. So I think, it allows you to play offense. It allows companies, there may be less competition right now. It gives you a little bit more time than you would normally. But I think you just have to be creative about finding where those niches are. Like I said, in my 10 years of running LodeStar, I think the niche and the focus of what we've had is only decreased. And I've talked to a lot of folks. I'd be curious to hear your opinion. And it's generally the same thing of the longer you're in business, the more narrow you feel like what you're focusing on, because you kind of find your lane.
I think the downfall of a lot of bigger companies, as they start to revenue up, instead of their main focus being on growth, their main focus is on protecting what they have.
Yeah.
And when you do that, I think it's I always look at business as an escalator that's always moving down. And if I'm not stepping forward, if I think I'm staying still, I'm not staying still, I'm going down, right? And there has to be that steady prod and that thing of, hey, we don't want to lose what we have, and so let's just stay still. Is actually
you don't have that luxury to your point as a small company, right? You survive by growing. Like if you're not growing a certain percentage a year as a smaller company, you're in trouble. So.
And they got nothing to lose. Like a big company, they're worried about what they might lose, and by worrying that, they end up losing it. Whereas a small company, they got nothing to lose, right? So it's like, why not try this? Why not try this innovation? So
and in that ways too, it was a comment I had said before, like what you're doing when things are going well versus not well is probably not all that different, right? Like you're probably checking the bank account, you're in survival mode a lot more anyway. So I think that's different. And you had talked about kind of like can't be stupid and run a company. I think I've talked to a lot of people who run businesses, and it's very different when you're someone who starts a business versus comes in and runs a business and kind of is scared and takes ownership of that. So I think that founder mindset is very different, and I think you're just generally going to be a little bit hungrier because of that, because you go from literally zero to whatever that number winds up being. So you're not brought in to play defense, right? You need to self-promote and play offense from day one.
Hey, so what do you see? We're talking about AI, and that's certainly a sexy topic right now. How do you see the role of loan officers evolving with the rise of AI and automation in the industry? Should we be worried?
No, probably.
Wait. That hesitation isn't quite convincing enough.
I said the short answer. Okay. It depends. I think there's always going to be a value for a loan officer because of the value of what they're able to bring, right? So the top loan officers, the people who can go out and get business, help people get the right mortgage. I'm a millennial now. Millennials and Gen Z going to buy homes. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what we're looking for. And I think finding that expert is really, really important. But how can you as a loan officer leverage AI or leverage things to grow that expertise, from, quite frankly, leveraging AI to produce more content, to get yourself out there, to do a podcast, to do something like that? That's really important, right? There's a lot of tools that you can use that make it a lot easier to do this and record a podcast, or to put content out, or to put social media out, or the parts of your job and the parts of your job that a company determine. For us, a very much manual entry type job, that can be done by someone else, that can be automated. So I think it's basically looking at how does the loan officer evolve? What are the things that you should be doing? And then how can you leverage the tools out there to do more of that, or do it with a wider reach?
And maybe you just answered this, but I'm going to ask this in case there's anything you think you need to add. Is what's your advice to mortgage loan officers trying to navigate, the current market challenges? Probably
a lot same as businesses. I think find your niche is important, right? Whether it be in a community, whether it be in a certain product type, in a loan type. And I think that niche, in my opinion, for things to be successful, especially if you're someone who wants to go and create content, like you've done a ton of, obviously, Carl, it has to be authentic in my mind. It has to come to a point where we're not performing here, we're recording, right? All you're doing is recording a conversation you probably have normally, or recording things you would say normally, or writing down things that you would write down or want to do normally. So I think finding what's authentic to you is really, really important.
Yeah. So what's the what should be the top focus for mortgage professionals aiming to stay ahead in the next decade? Is that same thing as like finding that niche?
Yeah, I think ultimately, if you're able to get to borrowers and try to communicate with borrowers effectively, you do that and like figure out ways to continue to do more of that. I think, for me, even as a founder, I always think, what is my superpower? What is the thing that I'm best suited to do at the company? And how can I cut out everything else to do more of that? So as a loan officer, it's a little more narrowly defined of going out, talking to people who want to apply for a mortgage and getting that information in. But is your superpower in doing things in a community? Is it in, social media for a wider reach? Are you just a dialing for dollars type person and really comfortable with that? So I think find what works best for you to get there, and then figure out a way to do a lot more of that ultimately. And expand that reach would probably be my advice.
Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah, I think it's definitely an evolving landscape right now. Yeah. And I think just, keeping our eyes open. Yeah. And if you got a convertible, ride with the top down, so you got no blind spots. I think that's
the beautiful thing about this industry, Carl. It always is, right? Like you can talk to anyone about real estate, and they'll have an opinion. They'll be affected by it. People always need a place to live, and this is an industry that everything touches. The price of lumber coming over from Canada affects us. The interest rates in China affect us. Like so many things affect real estate, and it's always changing. And I think that's the thing that's really exciting about it.
Good stuff, man. Hey, so Jim, you are the CEO over at LodeStar Software Solutions. Tell her about, I think a lot of people have heard of you and know what that is, but for those that don't, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we're a mortgage technology company, LodeStar. I founded the company with our CTO about 10 years ago now. And we are the closing costs experts. So when someone's going and disclosing a mortgage, filling out that loan estimate form that has to go to a borrower, we automate and guarantee that data that they utilize. So we're very much kind of a back-end solution. We're integrated with your origination system, your point of sale systems. And we make sure that you don't have to wait on a title agent to get fees. You don't have to manually enter information. You click a couple of buttons and you get that data that you need, and then you can go and do the other parts of your job that are more impactful.
Hence the faster 50-day closing, right? Hence,
exactly. Yeah, we help with a small part of it at least, but like I said, we have a niche, and it's closing costs.
Yeah, very good. Hey, Jim, if somebody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Jim Paolino. We also have a podcast that we do at LodeStar. It's called the Lending Leaders Podcast. We're just starting season 4. You can find that wherever you get podcasts. We're a YouTube channel as well.
And that was the lending
for our company website.
I'm sorry, and that was the lending. What was the podcast again?
It's the Lending Leaders Podcast.
The Lending Leaders Podcast. Yeah. Good name, man. Good stuff. I'll be sure to go check that out. So awesome. So is anything I should have asked you today, Jim, that I missed? Did we cover it all, or something I should have asked you that I didn't?
No, but I hope this was valuable.
Oh, dude, it was awesome. So real good. So Jim, thank you so much for taking the time to come hang out with us. Be sure to go check out his podcast. And boy, we always appreciate those reviews. So thank you much for the reviews, and thank you so much for forwarding these episodes to your loan officer friends that are in the mortgage industry. That really helps the algorithms for people finding us, and that's the purpose of doing this podcast, is to bring more information to you as a loan officer and the mortgage company to help survive these times. So again, be sure to go check out the September edition on the article Taking Flight with our good friend Jim Paolino. And I think we got it. That covers it. So thanks for being part of our day, and thank you for letting us be part of your day. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Scotsman's Guide podcast that we call the Author Showcase. Thanks again, everybody. Bye-bye.